What I want to look at next is participation and empowerment. So we've looked at what detached youth work is. We've looked at how detached youth work sits within the whole sphere of youth work and what street-based youth work looks like and how we would engage young people. So what do we mean? What do youth workers mean when they talk about participation? So we can have a bit of a conversation now. So I think what I'm going to do is come back to the group. And this is where you notice my technical prowess. Okay, so what do we mean by participation? How do we know? I'll give you a bit of a little bit of a lead in. How do we know when young people have started to participate?
It would be the opposite of what's happening now. So they would be conversating, they would be engaging, they would be asking questions, and perhaps feeling free enough to joke around or talk about something that's funny that's happened.
There's a bit of a rapport, isn't there?
Yeah.
There is that engagement, isn't there? There's not just a kind of milling about. And what do we mean about empowerment? What do we mean when someone's empowered?
Something there about agency.
Mm.
Like I'm able to make decisions about what I do or what happens to me or what we do together.
So a certain amount of control about what's going to happen next.
I find power something interesting thing to talk about, really, because you can't give power to somebody. You have to disempower yourself, which I think especially when we're talking about youth work, is a really interesting concept as well.
I like that whole thing around agency, because it is around that completeness and confidence within oneself, and that feeling, that clear direction of where you want to go. And often with empowered young people, they start to raise aspirations and have targets and start to have ideals that they want to work towards. Let's just look at that a bit more. So, empowerment. Now, all youth workers love this model. And I can't see Sharon's face, but I should imagine she's smiling.
We can't see your screen, John.
Oh, can you not? Sorry. I better share content, hadn't I?
Yeah. I am smiling, but for other reasons currently. It's coming.
Right. Okay. Right. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah. So this was developed by John Huskins in the mid-90s. Some books credit it to 1995, but this really does summarize beautifully that process. So if you look at stage one at the bottom, that's when you first start. In fact, there's a pre-stage before that, before you make contact, where you're wandering around in detached youth work. You're doing that mapping. So that mapping is a pre-stage to stage one. But then you have that contact. You meet regularly. You start to kind of understand skills, and we sometimes talk about this as understanding the assets that young people have. What skills do they have? What resources do they have? And there's that team building, and then there's that shared responsibility, full responsibility, and leadership. We often talk about, a good example is some of the accreditation programs like Duke of Edinburgh, if anyone's ever done that, or if you think about the Scouts and Guides, when young people earn badges, young people take real control of their own autonomy, and they're leading. And I often say a good youth worker isn't leading. A good youth worker is facilitating. And I often say, when you find yourself as a youth worker doing the role of a Butlins redcoat, and you're planning loads of activities and you're leading them, you ain't doing youth work. When you're doing youth work, you're supporting young people to do it safely for themselves. And this whole process here, this 6 to 18 month process, you can't put a time on it. This is where we are working with young people to be. Empowered young people, and there's a good picture of Jack playing in a Zorb ball. An empowered young person will have understanding, knowledge and skills, and they will understand themselves and be comfortable in that. Aware of their social networks and engage in positive relationships, have the ability to influence, express opinion and be heard, and bring others to account. I often think of youth parliament as a good example of that. But often when I've seen young people do that, they actually do fit. It's interesting how young people do develop very, very strong responses. And I've really enjoyed pieces of work where we've connected young people with town or parish councils. And young people have fed through their ideas to councillors, and they've stood up in council meetings and they've said, yeah, this is what community life is like for us. This is what it's like for us. But this is how we want to change it, and it's involving young people in that process. And we'll be able to access to opportunities and resources and feel really, really confident in doing that. And I mean, just simply working with young people to engage with college courses and thinking about education is a good example of that. Participation. So this is another model that youth workers tend to work by. And again, that example that I gave earlier of the Butlins Redcoat, if you're finding yourself in that role, then young people are being manipulated into certain activities and trying to being drawn into certain activities. Rung 2, young people are decorated, and then rung 3, young people are tokenized. Often you see that when there's a select group of young people, often 2 or 3 young people that are used to promote something, they're actually not fully engaged, they're just there tokenistically. But then kind of moving up to rung 8, where young people and adults share decision making. And that's great because you're having those conversations. Young people are coming up with solutions rather than consuming. And there's a great book, which kind of, it's fantastic. I always recommend it. It's Youth Work 101. It was written in 1983. It's called Creators, Not Consumers. And it's about young people being creators rather than consumers. And it's so easy to ply on a set of activities and to try and attract young people into consume. Whereas what we want to do is work with young people to create. And that's the whole purpose of the detached youth work, to work with young people to create, where they're having those conversations and they're saying, do you know what, our neighbourhood is really messy, we want to do something about it. There's a real problem with domestic abuse, we want to do something about it. There's a real problem with the town council not listening, we want to do something about it. Or changing a community space, it might be there's an arts project, they might want to do some graffiti or something like that. But it's about working with those young people to create and not consume. So it's really important to remember that. Degrees of participation. So we start through right from the right, where you got youth initiated and directed. Young people have the initial idea and decide how the project is to be carried out. And then we've got adult initiated, where share decisions with young people. Assigned and informed, adults decide on the project and young people choose to be involved in it. And again, that goes back to that Redcoat model that I mentioned. And then consulted and informed, and then youth initiated, share decisions with adults. So that does those degrees of participation. And there's a reference there.